Well, I'm joined by Jack Schofield, the computer editor of The Guardian. Jack, all these machines in the Intel family claim to be compatible with IBM PC, but it's not quite as simple as that, is it?
No, it never is. It is a fact that most IBM compatibles will run most software, but unfortunately, the IBM standard isn't written down. It's a moving target. Sorry. You'll find that IBM has produced 3 versions of its disk operating system. It's issued at least 3 versions of the IBM PC, and there are 5 different machines in the IBM PC family. In fact, the situation has become so complicated that IBM has published a book of its software, and you can see from the ticks and crosses that are next to the programs, the ticks are programs that will run, the crosses are programs that won't. So even if you have an IBM PC, there's no guarantee that a particular program will run. In fact, the only way to be sure is to try it.
So IBM selected the operating system, it selected the chip, and because of IBM's marketing power, it became almost a standard, a de facto standard, it's called early on, by chance. Is that a good thing for the industry?
Well, it's been very good for the industry because it stimulated the enormous growth of software that we've seen over the last few years. Most of it very good.
Now, IBM isn't completely invincible. They have made quite a number of mistakes. The PC Junior was a complete flop. The portable machine, well, Compaq got in first, and they really never got off the ground with their machine. Compaq killed them. And as we've seen, their range of machines are incompatible with each other, and we're not sure whether that's by design or by accident. What about the future? If they choose a chip and they choose an operating system for the future, is that going to be a standard?
Well, I don't know. It's going to be the market that decides. The fact is that the IBM PC is now out of date, and whether they can adapt it faster than somebody else can come in with a new design, like for instance the Motorola 68000 can address 16 megabytes of RAM, which is far more than the IBM PC's 640K limit, which is limited by DOS. So,
tell me what you expect out of a new operating system that might become a standard in the future.
Well, I think that what we need in the future is a multitasking operating system.
That means being able to run more than one program at the same time.
Yes, and this is the big advantage of having the extra memory. The IBM PC was a single-user standard, and I think that perhaps its day may have gone.
So as a multi-user standard, you mean, again, more people being able to use the same machine, rather like their System 36? Wouldn't that compete with the System 36?
Well, it might, but the fact is that you can get a Motorola 68000 in a machine as cheap as the Atari 520, 512K of RAM, £750.
It sounds as if there's a lot of competition. Thank you very much, Jack. Well, we seem to have arrived at a standard, at least for a single-user business system, not by design, but by the marketing power of IBM. How have the other manufacturers been affected by this? IBM's success has left other manufacturers like Roger Foster rushing to get onto the IBM bandwagon. His business success depends on his apricot computer being as compatible with the IBM PC as possible.
What you've got to remember is that it's all about industry standard software, and IBM, as we have with apricot, we use an industry standard chip from Intel and an operating system from Microsoft, and it's around that the architecture of all these major personal computers is built around those 2 things, the chip and the operating system.
Foster wants potential buyers to grasp the idea that the apricot will run most of the important software written for the IBM. But there are some problems. For example, his machine uses 3.5-inch disks, and only on his latest does he offer the IBM-compatible 5.25-inch disks.
I think almost now, throughout the industry, it's accepted that 3.5-inch technology is superior to 5.25. The packing density is greater, the quality and reliability is far greater, and pretty well everybody would accept that that's the way the industry is going. So I think you'll find that IBM themselves will join the 3.5-inch game within the next few months.
Close as it is to the present IBM standard, it's frustrating for apricot users that there may be a long delay before good IBM-compatible software will work on the apricot. But making a computer that's 100% IBM-compatible could run into problems with IBM's legal department.
The question of compatibility is something that one can easily design into a machine without in any way infringing an IBM copyright. Now, I'd like to add that in those cases where a manufacturer has infringed our copyright, then we've acted firmly on that.
This leaves Roger Foster both trying to be as blue as IBM and never quite managing it.
Now, I would say the bulk of IBM's software will also run on apricot. Certain software does require to be tweaked, if you like, to show off the various features of our machine. The apricot has got a lot of features that the IBM hasn't.
Because it's really a balance, isn't it? If your machine is successful, software writers want to put it on your machine. If the software is successful, you want to get that software on your machine because that will help sell your machines.
Exactly, it is a chicken and egg situation, and it's that reason that it'd be very difficult for somebody to now enter the market because he couldn't create that momentum.
Personal computers sell for the range and quality of the software that work on them. This particular program was written by Lotus for the IBM PC and called Symphony. Well, the Apple Macintosh is quite different to the IBM PC. It uses completely different chips. In other words, in the industry jargon, it's incompatible. So Lotus had to rewrite Symphony, and they even gave it a completely different name. They called it Jazz. In today's market, you have to be very courageous to be as different from the IBM PC as the Macintosh is. Jazz took a year to convert from an IBM version to one that would run on the Mac. That year, if a Mac owner wanted to run Lotus's best-selling package, he was out in the cold. But the Mac's makers believe they have the right approach.
It's that we have a different style, we have a different heritage. We are not a traditional, well-managed computer company. We are something new that creates new markets, new applications.
1984. Apple is about to revolutionize the world of personal computers.
Apple's advertising ridicules the well-managed companies that play the look-alike game.
Where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet, one army on earth, one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves.
Apple have always been innovators and hope that their bright ideas will shatter the image of IBM in the eyes of the overcautious buyer.
Discover why, for you, 1984 won't be like 1984.
It's hard to believe that even the most caring computer user worries that Microsoft wrote the software and that IBM made the machine. But for Europeans, the debate is very important. For 10 years now, we in Europe have been falling behind in the race to produce a surplus in high technology. Unlike the Americans, who sell more than they buy, and very unlike the Japanese, who have even the Americans worried. An important strategy to get Europe firmly established in the personal computer market is being drawn up in a small town in Italy. Because Ivrea is Olivetti's town. Even the hotel is in the shape of their traditional product, a typewriter. In 1978, Olivetti took a crucial decision. They realized the only way to stay in office equipment was to produce personal computers. With clever marketing, this turned an ailing Italian typewriter company into one of the fastest growing concerns in Europe, last year making £250 million profit. Elsorino Piol is head of corporate strategy at Olivetti. From his office in Ivrea, he masterminds the battle against IBM.
Every time we are competing with IBM, we target one of our products against the IBM product. We are trying to see what we can offer to our customer more than IBM. Sometimes it can be a speed. Sometimes it can be something else.
To keep pace with Big Blue, Olivetti spent £50 million last year on automation. Robots keep productivity up and the cost of making each computer down. For in a market where IBM is calling the tune, the only way to survive is to keep your productivity as high and your costs as low as IBM's. Olivetti has increased its production six-fold in this factory in the last 3 months. They keep parts assembly almost entirely in their own hands, fully aware of the problems that IBM has had with outside suppliers. But above all, the fight against IBM's domination is a battle of the standards. And Olivetti's first move in that game has been to make its machines IBM compatible.
If you have the standard, you must follow the standard. You must try to utilize the software available by different software houses. From the other side, you cannot sleep on present standard, but you must try to push for new standard Because if one day they are an alternative to the present standard, this alternative should be not guided by IBM, it should be guided by the industry.
Olivetti's strategy is to capture a sizable share of IBM's own market, using IBM's standard, and then to promote another that's firmly under Olivetti's control. This involves exploiting a shortcoming of Microsoft's operating system, that it's only capable of running one program at a time. Olivetti are pushing an operating system called Unix that allows several programs to be run at once. To this end, Signor Piol, like a modern Machiavelli, has been creating alliances.
For instance, in the case of Unix, the standard is supported today in Europe by a group of the major European computer manufacturers. They are ICL, Nixtor, Siemens, Bull, and ourselves. In the case of it's a standard for education, there are three major companies like Thomson, Econ, and Olivetti pushing for the new standard.
The most important alliance Signor Piol has made is with IBM's great US rival, AT&T, who developed the Unix operating system and own 25% of Olivetti. Together they make a big enough mass to take on IBM and survive.
It's like in the personal computer, it's like in many other industries, in which basically the car industry or refrigerator industry, in which basically the people that can play the game are going to remain very few. By sure we are going to have IBM, by sure we will be there. Some Japanese, even is difficult to understand what the Japanese are going to do in this area, but some Japanese are going to be on the market. And after this name, the question is very open.
The battle for the soul of the personal computer is a conflict in which raising and following a standard is the key to victory. It's a battle in which IBM can afford to rest on its laurels. But while other manufacturers publicly crowd to IBM's standard, privately they survey the consequences.
It was very difficult when we did it 3 years ago. Today it would be impossible, almost impossible for anybody to get into this business.
Nobody will come and beat a path to our door. It's fair to note that people only beat paths to IBM's door. It's as simple-minded as that.
And as a consequence, many of the companies who are with us today will be gone tomorrow, except one.